It's like meth head crackdemic over there, okay? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to go ahead and sit down and get my thoughts out about the Dylan Rounds case. Here we go. A lot of you watching probably already know the rundown of the timeline, but I'm gonna tell it a little bit different than what I've heard because I feel like we need to. We need to start at a different place here. So I'm gonna start on Wednesday, May the 25th, which is whenever Dylan had a very strange encounter with a bloody, ragged man named Chase Vinstra. Dylan was driving back into town or driving around, and this Chase guy came onto the road from in the middle of the desert basically, and according to Dylan, who called his mom to tell him about this crazy crap, Chase even told Dylan that he had been out in the desert for literal days. Now Dylan lies to his mother here and tells her that yes, while he let Chase use his phone, he did not give him a ride into Montello like he was asked to. It comes out later, and Dylan did in fact give Chase a ride. Now, the very last actual physical sighting of Dylan would have been the next day, where it said that he was at a restaurant in Montello. Now, there's a man involved in this situation named Kurt Wadsworth. Him and his daughter are claiming to have been the last ones, or part of the last group of people to have seen Dylan on Thursday at the restaurant. And the daughter and Kurt are trying to now state that Friday they saw Dylan, and that Dylan was showing off to them the fact that he had just pressure washed his truck. But that hasn't been confirmed by literally anyone else. And here is where we get into Saturday, which is the last known phone conversation that was had with Dylan. His grandmother Karen called him at 6:51 a.m. that Saturday morning, and he kind of rushed to get off the phone with her because it was about to start raining, and he had a bunch of seed in his seed truck, and he needed to go get it parked in the grain shed so that his seed didn't spoil and sprout, and then he would be, screwed from doing whatever he was doing. But it came out later that it was known by the grandparents, the one who called him that morning, that he was going to be out on his fields working all night Friday night. So then my question is, was he out there and awake all night and then still awake come this phone call at almost 7 o'clock in the morning? Or had he finished what he was doing and had been asleep and then woke up and it was raining, and so he was trying to get off the phone? Because if he was still out there working, I don't know if he answered that phone at his RV camper that he was staying at, that's about 5 miles away from his actual farmland, or if he was still actually on his fields. And because they're so close together in that 15.4 square mile radius of a tower, I don't think we really know the answer to that question. And it was verified that it was kind of sprinkly that morning, but it didn't start having like a really big hard rainstorm until later on in that evening. And then all day Sunday, it basically just like went off with rain. So when Dylan got off the phone with his grandmother, he told her he was going to call her back. And then he didn't call her back. And then no one heard from him all the rest of the day. And then come Sunday, Grandma Karen calls a guy named Don, who used to work with Dylan on the farm and had actually just been fired like a few weeks before this. Basically, Dylan was working on something else than what Don felt he should be working on the property, and Dylan got upset and words were exchanged because it was Dylan's property and somebody was trying to tell him how to do it, you know what I mean? And so Don ended up getting fired from working with Dylan. Now she calls Don on Sunday to go out there and check on Dylan. Now at this point it's been well over 24 hours since the last time anyone has heard from him. And he says he's going to go out there and check on Dylan at the camper area. Remember, this is 5 miles away from the actual farmland itself. Now, apparently he goes out there and sees Dylan's truck and states that the camper is like locked. But he doesn't call Grandma Karen back on Sunday. They don't speak again until Monday. He apparently went out there on Sunday, didn't see a sign of him, but all his things are there and locked up, and didn't call her back till Monday. I don't like that. I found it kind of awkward, I guess, that they decided to go out to the farm area first instead of going out to his living quarters at the travel camper. I don't know why, but to me it would seem like you would want to go where he lives first. I don't know. I guess maybe they always thought that, you know, farming accident could happen, and so that's where they went, because that's kind of like maybe where their fears just drove them. Because they actually didn't even know that Dylan was supposed to be out farming all night Friday night until like a few weeks later is whenever all that information came out from the grandparents. I don't know why that took so long to come out, because if he was really just on his farm, then okay, cool, just tell us that. But that's where my question came from, you know, earlier. Once they get there, things start getting a little crazy about like an hour and a half in or so. They find Dylan's boots just kind of tossed behind this big dirt mound, which is apparently the opposite direction from the grain shed than he would have gone to have left the property to go back home. Now, the thing about where the grain shed is that it's not actually on Dylan's actual property line. Now, the owner of this property's name is Joe. And Joe is leasing that property to a man named Ed. Now, Ed allowed this man named James Brenner to stay in a trailer right next to the grain shed after James's trailer burnt down on a piece of property that he owns elsewhere. Now, according to everything that I have researched, James, same person, was not a squatter, as he was placed there with grace by Ed, and in return he was to act as security for the property. Dylan being able to use the grain shed was the original owner Joe's whole situation that was handled between Dylan's grandfather and Joe. So Dylan could use the grain shed per Joe, owner, and James Brenner was living in the trailer by the grain shed per leaser of land, Ed. And James is actually going to be pretty important, because as of this recording, he is in jail from what I believe is non-related charges. But last week, a bunch of documents got filed against him from the prosecution, and they're about to be charging him for something, but we have yet to find Dylan. So what they're going to charge him with, I'm not sure. I know that in the records, something kind of like stood out to me. It shows that there's security footage from a Walmart, there is receipts from a Walmart, and then there's photographs from the rental that Dylan had. So I'm going to guess maybe he was renting this travel trailer. But then again, there's also a bunch of rumors going around that he was possibly staying actually in Montello, but I don't think that that would have been a rental situation. But that's how it's labeled in the documents. So it almost makes me wonder if something was found and some proof was found on whatever this object was that would link it to Dylan in this situation, and then they just so happen to have a receipt and security footage of James Brenner buying this exact same object at Walmart. And then there was some polygraph results and some other stuff like that, interviews with Don, which we will talk about him here in a minute. So right now, he's technically like the main suspect, James Brenner is. Now, since James Brenner was acting as security at the property because of his agreement with Ed, James had keys to all the gates. Now, this is where there's been some discrepancy, and I can't find clarification, but some sources are stating that there was a specific gate that Dylan would have had to have accessed and gone through in order to get to the grain shed that was on Joe's property line. And James Brenner would have to be called by Dylan, hey yo, I need the gate unlocked. And James would come out and unlock the gate, and it was his job to make sure it was locked when Dylan was done. I've heard that this gate was locked whenever the police got there and everyone was searching. So that's what led everyone to believe that, because the grain truck, the seed truck, was actually parked in the grain shed the way that we figured it was supposed to have been, since that's what he told his grandma he was going to run to do, that the gate was locked because James Brenner would have been there to have unlocked it, let Dylan through, and then lock it back. But then there's been some interviews I've listened to where the gate being locked is odd because Dylan never locked the gate. So I don't know which one it is. I just know that apparently the gate was shut and locked back. After a while, they take off over to where Dylan's camper trailer is. And they get there and everything looks the way that Don Hatley, is it Hatley or Hetley, stated that the truck was there and everything was locked up. Well, there was no tracks either, according to investigators and all the interviews that I've listened to of Candace on various medias. No tracks anywhere. And law enforcement let Dylan's parents take the truck home. Let them break out the back glass of the truck to get inside of it and touch all over it and do all the things and break into the camper and all. They didn't do anything to try to maybe preserve any sort of possible crime scene here. Y'all remember that I said Kurt and his daughter backtracked and tried to say that they saw Dylan on Friday in Montello. At that point, her words coming out of her mouth literally stated Dylan was showing off to us the fact that he had just power washed his truck. Now, the reason why that was going to end up important later is because Dylan's parents claim that a few days after they got his truck home, they realized that it looks like it had been power washed. But I have some thoughts on that. It had just greatly rained all weekend. And if that truck was sitting still and wasn't moving and the rain was just beating onto the truck, it would have cleaned it. My car gets covered in pollen where we live right now all of the time. We get a rainstorm and my car looks like I just took it through a car wash. And another reason why I don't think it was power washed and why it was rain washed is because she makes a big deal about how the wheel wells were not cleaned and still full of mud. Well, yeah, if your vehicle is just sitting there and it's raining down hard on it for 18 hours, the rain's not coming up from the ground and can't change direction like that. So it would make sense to me that the tires would be clean looking, the truck would be clean looking, and there would still be mud in the underbelly. And now this person, who's the daughter of someone who a lot of people feel is involved, is coming up with some story about Dylan showing off that it was a power washed truck. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to anybody, because according to the family, that truck was a tool. It wasn't something he rode around to get attention. It literally was just like a wrench in his toolbox. He didn't care about it being cleaned. He never cleaned the damn thing, according to them. So at this point, they have found Dylan's boots literally thrown behind this dirt mound, because if you go back and look at the photo, they're probably a good like 6 to 8 feet apart, like they were just tossed or maybe fell and landed that way off of something, possibly. And a locked truck, a locked camper, and at this point in time, on Monday, the key fob to his truck and his gun is also missing, along with the phone and the wallet. This is where shit gets hella weird, y'all. So Kurt Wadsworth calls Candace a few days after and tells her that Chase, the bloody guy, and somebody named Robert have Dylan hostage in a house, in Robert's house. And he's adamant. He's freaking out. Oh my God, I know they have him. Oh my God, I know they're hurting him. I don't know what's going on, but they've got him. And so she's taking it serious because what the hell? She contacts Box Elder, tells them what's going on, and according to her, they don't really care all that much. They're not really going to try to do anything. So Justin, who is Dylan's father, then tells them, look, if you don't do something, I'm going to walk into that house by my damn self. Okay? Me too, yo. So they get over to where this Robert person's house is, and Candace says she has to actually call 911 to let the local law enforcement know that her son is being held hostage in this house, because, like I said, Box Elder did not contact them. Quite a few deputies show up. I believe it was somewhere around like between 6 to 8 different squad cars pulled up here. And they got permission to search the house, search the shed, search all the things, and there was no Dylan. But guess what happens? While all eyes are on this Robert and Chase guy, the missing key fob to Dylan's pickup truck and his missing gun magically reappear back at his camper. I'm not sure exactly where the key fob was found, but according to reports, the gun was found in his bathroom under like some newspapers. Sounds like a distraction now, don't it? As soon as I heard this, I instantly knew something was up with Kurt, because he purposely sent them on a wild goose chase for nothing. Literally nothing. And one thing that Candace mentions whenever she says that they allowed her and Justin to break in the back glass of Dylan's truck is that she's probably like a good foot shorter than her son. I know the feeling. And she normally has to move his seat up in order for her to reach the pedals, okay? And when she got in the truck this time, she didn't have to move it. She didn't have to move it at all. And guess who else is about the same height as Candace? Little short Kurt. I think Kurt was able to come up with this distraction pretty easily because Montello barely has like a handful of people, you guys. It's like nothing. So whenever Dylan ended up giving a ride to Chase like apparently went around asking about Dylan, and then the rumor is that he ended up getting a ride out to Dylan's place with Robert being the one who drove him out there. Nothing has led to those two. And the only person blaming Chase is also someone who's being really super sketchy, not honest whatsoever, and has been leading the family on a wild goose hunt from the very beginning of this entire situation. I don't believe Chase and Robert have anything to do with this, and that's just my personal opinion. For all we know, Dylan could have offered Chase a job. He did just fire Don, and maybe he needed help, and saw this guy was like not doing very well, and just offered him to make a little bit of money working out there. Maybe that's why Robert was bringing him back out to Chase's property, if that's actually true. I just don't feel like Chase is involved. That's just my gut feeling. I could be wrong. I just don't feel it. Now look, I'm not even going to sit here and act like there's been like new developments in this case, because there hasn't been any. There's been some crazy stuff that has apparently been found by PI James Terry. And there was some text messages that he had from the people in Dylan's family on his father's side that actually hired him that are a little interesting, which we might go over later. Not a lot came from that. Now, there's a possibility that Dylan could have been in a so-called vigilante group. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever, because you would be very territorial of your property if you had been out there like really literally blood, sweat, and tears into this property and there was just a bunch of meth head, little crackhead thieves running around everywhere, alright? And that's apparently exactly what the hell goes down. There's a bunch of meth heads that just run around all crazy in the damn middle of the desert, and they go around stealing people's stuff. And everybody knows about it, and everyone knows their names, and everyone has all these stories of all these things that all these crazy crackheads have stolen from them. And ain't nobody in jail. But y'all, it's like meth head crackdemic over there, okay? When the boots were found, there was a couple of spots on them, but nothing really looked like anything but like oils and stuff like that. They found out later that there was actually a spot of blood on the boots, and the blood was Dylan's. The problem with that is that the family was lied to about when it went to the lab. They were told that it was going to be going to the lab for testing because it was positive for blood and it was already there and being tested. And then when she asked about it, they weren't even in the lab yet. It was like 5 or 6 days later that they finally actually went to full lab testing. Now, do you guys remember how I said how I didn't like the fact that Dawn was asked to go check on Dylan and didn't immediately call Karen back? Dawn went out to the property himself first, did not see Dylan, and then went and picked up James Brenner. And they were supposed to have been driving around all day looking for Dylan. But then another story came out later stating that James Brenner had gone over to Dawn's place because they were barbecuing in the rain. But then there's been discrepancies on when James actually got to Dawn's house. Like by 2 hours, I think, really. Why are you barbecuing in the rain? That's just weird. And another whole crazy part of this, and the actual reason why James Brenner is in jail right now, is because he's not allowed to have weapons because of his past discretions. And they found not only like gunpowder, but actual weapons there. Now, Dawn has come out and stated that at some point after Dylan went missing, James Brenner came and brought him weapons and asked him to hold them for him. Now, why would you take weapons from your house and bring them to someone to hold unless you were hiding something? Because not every weapon was removed from James Brenner's house. At first, I tried to play devil's advocate, and I was like, okay, his trailer's by the grain shed, which is exactly where Dylan told his grandma he was going before he went missing. He knows he's not supposed to have weapons, and he knows he has violent type charges, so of course he would end up being a person of interest. So at first, I thought he was just getting rid of the weapons maybe to just like not get in trouble for having them, knowing he was gonna be like searched. But then come to find out they found other weapons in his RV camper place he was staying. So that threw that out the window. Almost feels to me like getting the call from Karen was like just some sort of alert that they needed in order to get rid of things. And that's why he didn't contact her back right away. I feel like he is involved, and again, you know, just like my disclaimer in the beginning of this is all speculation based on everything that is right here as public knowledge on the internet and everywhere. I don't understand why he didn't immediately call Karen. Him, James Brenner, Kurt, all of them all know each other, like for decades now. Kurt is the one who's the right size to have been the person to have driven Dylan's truck back to the camper. He also called and staged a fake, like, hostage situation. And as soon as everyone was diverted, the damn key fob and the gun show up. So my thinking was that he drove the vehicle, Dylan's pickup, back to his camper. And then what do guys do when they get out of the vehicle? They don't carry purses. They put their keys in their pockets. So I think he hopped out and accidentally put the key right in his pocket after locking it out of a muscle memory pattern of his own vehicle, and then had to cause a distraction in order to put the crap back so it wasn't found on his person. Why else would you fake this call? There was no proof of Dylan being there. And to be honest, there's no proof that Chase or this Robert guy have done literally anything wrong. Like literally at all. And it's really kind of hard for me to understand why Chase is even such a big part of this storyline right now. Apparently, Kurt and Chase do not like each other. And I don't know why they're like such big enemies, but it would explain why Kurt would use him as like a scapegoat person to blame for something, especially knowing that everyone knows Chase's reputation for being in bad with drugs and being a thief and all the things, right? So of course it's a believable story that he would have had to have come up with in order to create a diversion. Now, I only believe he was possibly creating a diversion for himself because of the seat thing, because both Don and James Brenner are pretty big. You know, they're not like, they would have definitely had to have had the seat all the way back. I'm just saying. And of course, we have the last phone ping, which was basically in the exact same radius area as the phone call with Grandma Karen. The problem with this radius area is, from towers, it's a 15.4 square mile radius. The biggest problem is that a part of that radius falls on the other side of the Nevada-Utah state borderline. Now, there was some tracks that Candace saw whenever Heavy D helped them with an aerial search a while back that led into the wash area. And apparently, whenever it rains really bad in that area, the walls of this area can like slough off in massive chunks that can be like feet wide and just kind of like fall down like a imploded building, kind of. So there's truck tracks that Candace state look very similar to Dylan's pickup in this wash area that lead right through the state line. And apparently the big searches that were done by law enforcement had to stop at that state line because of course you have your stupid jurisdiction problems. And now I know there's been like private searches, and I know that there's some groups on YouTube and some other places, you know, that are doing their own physical searches out there, like grinding, you know, looking for him for real. But there's something about this last ping that I've been hearing back and forth that's kind of got me with like an idea of where maybe he could be, or at least maybe where his phone could be, or a possibility. Let's see if this makes sense. So I've heard from several different people, several different sources, several different videos, several different articles, that there's like a discrepancy in the last phone ping's time. And some places are stating 3:41 p.m. and some places are stating 2:41 p.m. Now, this Nevada-Utah state line also comes with a time zone change. And apparently the service out there is pretty great. Like, you basically will have signal all over the desert, which, lucky, because my property by the Trinity has literally, like, no service whatsoever, so that's crazy. So if your phone has signal and you cross over a time zone, it changes. It automatically will update to the new time zone. So I'm wondering if, since there's, like, a discrepancy in that, and it's a 1 hour discrepancy, if it's because he's like toting that time zone line and it's causing a read issue. And maybe that's why there's been different reports. But then again, I haven't had my eyes on the actual report. But if the time zone discrepancy situation is really a thing, I think it's a great possibility that, and I mean, this is going to be sad, but I believe that maybe he could be in that wash under massive amounts of clay, dirt, mud, nasty, you know, that comes out whenever it rains, the way that it horribly rained on Sunday. And the thing about the tracks in the wash is that Candace mentions that it looks as if the truck couldn't handle itself very well in the mud. And with that and the fact that the tracks look similar, in her opinion, to Dylan's truck tires, his four-wheel drive was also broken. Did not work. So it's a possibility that someone who didn't know that was driving Dylan's truck out there to dispose of something and couldn't handle the mud correctly because the tracks are fishtailing. And that kind of matches. There are some really crazy rumors going around off of what PI James Terry apparently found out about Kurt and Kurt's family. That is very, very scandalous and pretty horrible, to be honest. And I am undecided on if I believe that it could be connected. Now, maybe Kurt's relationship or motive for relationship with a young child, like 40-something years his junior, could be something, because I don't feel right about Kurt. I just don't feel right about Kurt. And the information we have on his family is not okay. And I don't know if I want to get into it just yet, like everyone else is, because I haven't seen the physical proof of this family's history that everyone's talking about. So I'm just not going to mention it right here. But we have literally nothing, except now the prosecution is putting evidence against James Brenner, but without a body and without them stating that they actually know something, I don't know how this is going to end up going down for that. I don't know. This is such a crazy case, and this video was hell of a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, and I tried to edit this thing down as much as possible, but there was literally nothing I could take out. This is how much crazy crap is going on with this boy's disappearance case. I just am flabbergasted at the fact that at 16 years old, they allowed him to drop out of school and move to this Utah desert area basically by himself. No parents and grandparents are out there. It's just people that the family knows. He was 16. I'm just not okay with that. And I know, like, back in the day, all right, it was different, but this ain't back in the day. This is now. And I would never send my 16-year-old to the middle of nowhere to fend and live by themselves. I'm sorry. I don't care if it's your hopes and dreams, sweetheart. We can wait until you're old enough to be able to actually defend yourself properly and me not have to have a heart attack every day, okay? I feel like there's still a lot I could have said here, but this video is already like over half an hour. And I have to go and get my yard mowed because it's becoming a jungle. So maybe we'll go over it later, but like I said, there's no actual updates on anything. So until something happens, there's really not a lot more that really can be talked about here. Most of it is all just hearsay and rumors from these YouTubers that go live and allow locals to call in and just gossip. So none of it can really be trusted, to be honest. Alright, that's it. Bye, y'all.